Are we ready?
Yep,
Or are we waiting?
I'm just gonna get the slides up here. All right, so as I said, please introduce yourself in the chat and write your location. You can even share a time that you advocated if you like. Again, my name is Carrie Decker. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for West Virginia Rivers, and I'm in Charleston tonight. Our agenda for the evening, we have some introductions. We're going to talk about why we choose to advocate. We're going to go over some terms and procedures. We also have a presentation by Dr. Workman on what to expect during the session. And then we have a legislative update with Lucia Valentine and Casey Russell, who are with the West Virginia Environmental Council. We'll talk about meeting with your legislators, what you can do from home if you can't make it to the Capitol. We'll have a short breakout where we practice your ask and what that looks like with your legislators in person. We'll talk about registering to attend E-Day, and then we'll have questions at the end. So if anything pops up during any part of the presentation, please feel free to type your question into the chat, and we will take care of that at the end. So, not sure if this looks like a scary picture for you, but E-Day is coming up, and that will be February 23rd at the Capitol. And we're hoping to make E-Day not scary at all for you in your advocacy work. Here are a few reasons why we advocate. We advocate to let our elected officials know our opinion, and those officials could be delegates and senators that are within our state or representatives and senators federally in DC. That can look like local officials, county commissions, mayors, other local officials. We also advocate to influence legislators' decisions on pending bills. We advocate to pass favorable bills and to stop bad bills. And we also advocate to influence agencies.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Maria Russo, and I'm our policy specialist here at West Virginia Rivers Coalition. So you're going to be hearing from a few of us throughout the evening tonight with different perspectives of kind of the importance of advocacy and the 101 and 102 of this work. So before my role here, I was a lobbyist at the West Virginia Environmental Council and have since been at West Virginia Rivers Coalition. So we work a lot in partnerships. So you're going to hear from some different folks, including the lobbyists over at eCouncil this evening. So Carrie just talked about kind of why we advocate, right? And it's a lot of times about these really important issues that we care about, and we want to talk to our elected officials to make sure that they know how important these topics are, because we are the people that they are meant to represent. So in addition to talking about how we advocate or why we advocate, we also want to talk about how we advocate. So we talk a lot in advocacy about the inside game and then the outside game. And so you can literally think of it as the Capitol building, which you see there on the slides. There's a lot that goes on inside that building. That can look like policy advocates talking about different bills and providing information. It can also look like elected officials showing up every day to do the work that we have elected them to do. It can also look like working with agencies such as the Department of Environmental Protection that we work with very often to work on permits or to also weigh in on bills. So that's all of the work that's kind of happening day to day and having a presence throughout the legislative session. But just as important as that is the outside game as well. So the outside game is a lot of community organizing that happens. It's activists and advocates who might plan rallies, or they might write stories in the paper lifting up why these issues are so important. And so, coming out of this call, you may sign up for the West Virginia Rivers email list, or you might already receive our updates. And you often hear from us asking for us to fill out action alerts, right? And this is how we bring the outside voices into the Capitol. So, we do a lot of crossing over between that inside because they have to stay tied for the most effective advocacy. And we have to remember that we, the people, are part of the outside game. And so it's really our job to bring our voices inside to that building. So when we're thinking about getting involved with advocacy, there's a lot of different levels on which we can engage, right? So we often talk about this ladder of engagement, or kind of this advocacy pyramid. And so you can see here on the screen that it ranges from awareness and engagement to digital advocacy and calls, as well as one-on-one meetings. And these are all really effective tools and steps that we can use to reach those elected officials or those agency members that we talked about, right? And one thing we really talk about in this advocacy pyramid is making sure to play to your strengths. So there may be one thing on the screen right now that you say, oh, I would really love to do a one-on-one meeting. That's really where I'm strong. Lean into that, right? If that's not your, strongest suit, maybe raising awareness in your community is the place that is most effective for you. So really think about the skills and the strengths that you bring to the table and really lifting those up in however you decide to engage. And the next piece about advocacy that we wanted to cover is reminding folks that advocacy really takes time, right? So people might have heard back in 2023, which is in the middle of the screen, that we passed the PFAS Protection Act. But that was not the beginning or the end of the story around dealing with PFAS in West Virginia. So as you may know, PFAS are forever chemicals that have been found in our West Virginia public water systems. And the work to pass that PFAS Protection Act started even before this timeline on the screen shows up. So before 2020, but really a concurrent resolution was passed in 2020 to allow for some water sampling. That sampling, those results came out in 2022. That set us up to have the data to be able to pass that PFAS Protection Act in 2023. And then that allowed us to make the progress that we have over the last few years around the actual PFAS action plans. And that's really where we see the implementation of the legislation that we got passed. So we wanted to bring this up because we often don't we only see the end result of advocacy, right? Or sometimes we can really feel ourselves in the rut of like the lack of progress, and it can feel like nothing is happening. But it's really important to remember this long range view and to remember that, the small actions that we can do every single day may be contributing to this longer timeline without us even knowing it. And that's so important to keep in mind on those hard days at the Capitol. So at this point in time, you've probably heard a little bit about the session and the bills that are moving in the West Virginia legislature. So the West Virginia legislature has a 60-day session. It started on January 14th, and we are currently on day 16. So we are a quarter of the way there as of today. And some other details that we wanted to run through that are going to come up during that 60-day session, or maybe you've already been dealing with. So each person in West Virginia has there are 34 senators total, and you yourself have 2 senators. That's really important to remember because in the House of Delegates, there are 100 delegate districts, and you only have 1 delegate that represents you. So that can be a little confusing, but we want to make sure that folks know that you have 2 senators and 1 delegate that are elected to represent you. And in order to pass a law in the course of that legislative session, the legislation has to pass through both the Senate and the House of Delegates. So it can be introduced in either chamber, and it has to move through the committees that it's assigned to. So you may hear us say that a bill was single referenced, and that means that it only got assigned to 1 committee. Or you might hear that it's double referenced, and that means that it got assigned to 2 committees, and it has to work through those committees, then to the floor of whichever chamber it was introduced in. So for example, if a bill was introduced in the Senate and single referenced, it would go to that single committee, pass out of that, then it would pass on the Senate floor and before it moves over to the House. And then after that entire process is when the governor receives the bill, and the governor has to sign those bills in order for it to become law. And so, for those committees, we really wanted to point out that this is super key for every bill, right? Every bill is at least going to go, well, most of the time is going to go through at least one committee, unless certain exceptions take place, which we'll get to at the end. But this committee process is a super valuable advocacy opportunity because you're usually going to have a smaller amount of people that you're trying to target with your message. So a single committee may only have 12 members. And it's a lot easier for us to reach 12 members and really have thorough conversations with those folks to maybe make changes to the bills that would come in the form of amendments, or to kind of get some different shifts happening around that piece of legislation. So we really, in our action alerts that we'll be talking about tonight, we really, you'll hear us talk a lot about committees like send a message now to the Senate Judiciary Committee, because it's a really awesome opportunity to target those folks with really specific messaging. We also wanted to point out that the House of Delegates last year did change some of their rules. And so now there is an opportunity for public comment on some bills. I know there was a video of Delegate Kayla Young that was being passed around a couple days back where she was talking about how to comment on a bill and the portal that you can actually use right on the West Virginia Legislative website. And I think Carrie's going to be covering that a little bit further on too, of exactly how to do that. But we really wanted to point that out. And so these are all really awesome advocacy opportunities to have your voice heard about this legislation that you care about. Any bill that does finally make it to the floor, which you might hear us say, that just means it's in front of the full House or the full Senate at that point. And once it's on the floor, it's going to be read for 3 days. So you'll hear that it's on first reading, then second reading, which is when you can amend it, and then third reading, which is when it can actually pass or fail from that full chamber. Another key term we wanted to cover is crossover day. You've maybe heard us say that, and that means that a bill has to move out of committee and pass the full chamber and move over to the other chamber. So again, if the bill was introduced in the Senate and it moved through the committees and it passed on the floor, it's got to be over on the House side. So wherever that bill originated, it's got to be in the opposite chamber at crossover day. So if you just think of an actual crossing over, it's got to go from one side of the Capitol over to the other before that magical day of March 4th. And the last day of session of the 60-day session is going to be March 14th. So we're really in that time period where you're seeing a lot of bills ramp up. You're seeing a lot of things move very quickly. So there's a lot of people on this call who it's their job to track that legislation and to find out what's happening in the inside game, and then to bring that information to all of us so that we can effectively, leave a public comment on those bills or reach out to our committee members, just like we talked about, to make sure that our voice is really being heard. We did want to point out that they can and do change the procedures in the legislature. So earlier I said a bill has to pass through committee. Well, it can be discharged out of committee under very specific circumstances. So we won't get into all of the specifics of exactly how this can all be flipped on its head, because most of the bills are going to follow this procedure. So this is really the nuts and bolts that you want to be aware of as you're following bills to the legislature, knowing that yes, things can change, but we'll make sure to kind of keep you updated as any of those pieces of legislation may take a different turn along the path. But for most of them, like we said, they're going to be introduced on one side, passed out of committee, passed on the floor, and then move over to the other side before completing the legislative journey. So I know that was a lot, a lot of terms and procedures, but we'll be digging into it more as we continue this evening. And so I wanted to take this opportunity, after giving all of that information, to pass it over to Dr. Samuel Workman. He is a professor of political science and is also the director at the Institute for Policy Research and Public Affairs at WVU. So Dr. Workman has come on and given a great presentation in the past of a lot of those details and kind of what you can expect at the legislature. So we'll be turning it over to him before continuing on with the rest of our program. So thank you, Dr. Workman, for being here and for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. It's a great honor, actually. And yeah, we'll get rolling here. Let me share my screen and then we can. Everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good deal. So I would have been remiss not to give you a picture of one of the greatest rivers in the world there. That's the New River Gorge. I am actually a West Virginia native from I always say the land between the rivers. I grew up probably closer to Golly for sure, but definitely in that area. I love rivers and nature. So I'm going to talk about a few things today, and I'm going to center my presentation on an understanding of a few issues and how they're shaping up politically. In terms of bills on the floor, I would really encourage you. I'll put it in the chat once I'm done with this. To take a look at the Leg's own bill tracker, which is a really good tool for keeping track of where things are as well. Just a bit of an agenda. I'm going to tell you just a tidbit about myself. I'm going to move pretty quick and get to the policy issues, but I want you to be able to sort of put some confidence in what I'm saying and how I know what I'm saying. So, PhD in political science and statistics. I'm a data guy. I've worked in publicly engaged sort of science really for over a decade now. Really, and my expertise is really energy, disaster management, some of this sort of stuff. And I direct the Institute for Policy Research and Public Affairs. We tend to do basic and applied science, funded if possible, obviously, and really focus on data infrastructures and building data infrastructure. We're also a conduit for co-design research. So if any of you folks have projects or anything that you're needing partners on or would like a partner or would like analytical expertise, we're out there working hard for you. So I also sit on myriad governmental councils, committees, and all that. So I'm privy to some discussions around these sorts of things, and currently engaging in a good bit of research on all these as well. So here's the thing. Let's jump right into it. Data centers, everywhere, data centers, okay? So the way the debate is shaping up on this, a lot of it, and you'll know this innately, a lot of it on the input side is about co-location of power and lots of discussion about the ability of fossil fuels to power them. Now, some people will say, well, the tech folks don't like fossil fuels. They would prefer wind and solar to power these. They will tell you that is true, but they will take fossils any day if that means powering the data centers. And the hard thing there, I think, for the broader public, depending on which side of the issue you fall on, is we're not going to put our phones down anytime soon. So I expect this to continue, and I expect legislative action in some form on some of these things. One of the big issues and some real traction for pushback is effects on energy rates. And this occurs in two forms. One is directly, usage of more power, right? And then sort of grid failures, outages, and this sort of stuff. But the other is indirect. What has been going on in much of the country is that ratepayers are subsidizing these facilities kind of on the back of the envelope without a lot of knowledge that they're doing it. A lot of these debates about the grid and infrastructure hinge on how PJM structures auctions going into the future and the degree to which states are willing to kind of play ball with each other and with PJM on siting of these things. And that's not as simple as it sounds, because the incentives are such that governors don't want to be cooperative because they want the data centers in their state. But in order for them to be able to operate the way the tech giants want them to, there needs to be a lot of cooperation between states on this stuff. Debates about water, I suspect this is really pertinent to you folks. I can say that Google, I was in a room with Google not long ago. They're starting to produce what they think of as a mountain of evidence that should make people feel better about water usage. You would have to read that stuff, and your mileage may vary, is what I would guess. So you're going to see more of that, and likely pushback from the other side. In terms of siting, there is some discussion and concern, I might add, about state preemption of local governments becoming part of this debate. Local governments would rather not have that happen, but there's a little bit of that out there. There's also debate about whether we even have appropriate sites for these things. They need large, flat areas and co-located services. I can tell you that there's some framing, political and policy framing, beginning to emerge around these about natural disasters and national security. So one of the things to think about when you think about these issues is, why would someone cite it in West Virginia when they could cite it in Virginia? Well, one answer to that is that it's not likely the next raging climate change induced hurricane is going to knock them out here in the same way it would out in Virginia. So the debate over jobs, I can tell you, the data center folks are mostly losing that debate. Lots of economists are weighing in and talking about lack of jobs generated by these things. You can expect movement on tax incentives, especially for equipment. I say that because every other state around us has incentives for equipment purchase. And I can tell you from my I travel all over the state talking to citizens of all stripes. And I can say that there is a bit of a public belief out there in framing that data centers will bring better connectivity in terms of broadband internet and things like that. So just sort of some things to be aware of there. Let me talk a bit about energy overall. All of the talk at the very highest reaches right now is about capacity increases. And, the governor is driving this with the 50 by 50 plan. And a lot of this too is federal level policies are continuing to really pinch ratepayers. And so the legislature has already, you'll see a bill on up already to provide a legislative veto for rate increases from the PSC. So they're really trying to fight back against that. And that's wrapped up in national level sorts of politics discussions as well. Grid reliability is a huge issue for ratepayers, obviously. I could put a slide up here that showed you how unreliable our grid actually is, but I suspect you know from personal experience. But it's also an issue for prospective developers for these tech sites, and sort of the ability to have knowledge economies, which is kind of the buzzword around these things, arise around them. There is support in the state in terms of energy plans, the comprehensive energy action plan to retrofit some existing coal plants, extend lives. But I can also tell you that there are some other projects that lean more towards renewable or renewable adjacent sorts of technologies. Definitely taking a hard look at ditching carbon capture sort of stuff. I think there's already a bill up there for that. So be on the watch out for those things. I'm setting nuclear off here because there's going to be a huge effort on this front. The entire discussion is around the siting of SMRs, small modular reactors. So no one's really thinking about the gigantic, city size reactors they had back in the day. It's really about these small modular reactors. I know the state has a lot to do in terms of joining compacts for both source materials and for waste. And the permitting process for this is a real bear. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at it, but it's like 7 different agencies. And then you have state, federal, and then of course PSC. So aligning those permitting issues is becoming a huge hurdle for the state in that regard. And then of course site selection is going to require feasibility and impact studies. Really, the state will probably look towards a pilot program. They floated one in 2024 with House Bill 5150. You can take a look back at that if you'd like to see what one of those looks like. There is also discussion of repurposing existing energy sites for this, so like decommissioned coal plants and stuff like that. I can tell you that out in the public, there is a growing evidence that the more people believe in climate change, the more favorable they actually are to nuclear energy, so long as it's not too close. That's the general feeling around this. And then, as you know, waste for these things is always a perennial sort of thing. So let me talk a bit about public health. I expect a lot more stuff on the implementation regime. So we've banned the food dyes, but now there has to be an implementation regime for this, which I think may fall disproportionately on public health offices in the counties. We'll see. I think the state is waiting on some better decision tools, and we here at WVU are trying to help them with this to further target grant funding from the opioid settlements. But there are limits to this because the money is time sensitive. I can also say that workforce is a huge issue at the upper levels of government and the governor's office and executive branch agencies in a meaningful way, perhaps even more so than the legislature. And so a lot of issues around public health are beginning to be framed as workforce issues by folks, because if you are suffering from a substance use disorder, you have a hard time participating in the workforce. And WVU's running these rural hospitals. The state is really hurting for rural healthcare, truly. And it's not clear yet sort of how the federal money for rural health will be precisely targeted. So a bit of a round robin. You're going to see a lot more meat and potatoes again. You've already seen a couple of those early there with the Bible bill for schools and the human trafficking bill to align the state more closely with the immigration objectives. Foster care system continues to be a thorn in the legislature and governor's side. It's hard to say how attention to this is going to play out. Lots of focus on disaster warning systems, not so much on recovery, response and recovery stuff. And school systems are increasingly fragile out there. I also want to talk about an emergent policy issue and sort of bring this to your attention. It's nice to see it because I think it will affect a lot of things everyone does. There's been a long slide in coal severance tax. They plummeted, and oil and gas does not fill the coffers. The effects are geographically uneven, and counties disproportionately use it to fund general government. So as they decline, counties are very, very much, and the legislature is very worried about this, at risk of defaulting. Whole counties. It almost happened last year. So you can see that long-term decline. Coal on the top, oil and gas on the bottom. Oil and gas only accounts for about half of what coal used to account for the counties. In terms, that's small print, but you don't need to see the print. So over on your left there, those are the counties that are coal producers and get severance tax. On your right, those are oil and gas producers. They get oil and gas severance tax. Now, the upshot here is the way severance tax works. If you've lost all your coal, you're not going to get oil and gas severance tax revenues. They're going to go to the counties producing those revenues. So it creates some real sort of black holes for things in terms of funding government. And I'll show you one more here before I end it up and have some discussion. our county's governments, even though they have been cautioned repeatedly not to rely on severance taxes for funding general government, they do so overwhelmingly. So this is going to be a big issue for us here at WVU, for you at Rivers, and for every other person in the state that cares about the health, safety of individuals, and having a nice place to live. So that's it. You can find me at any of these channels. Yep, just check me out. I'm pretty easy to find on the web too. So Professor Google can get to me pretty quick. So I'm going to stop there and stop the share. And
Thank you,
see
Dr.
what you think.
Workman. We did have a few awesome questions in the chat that I'm sure other folks on the call may have similar questions. So the first, if you're willing to take this one, is can the state, West Virginia, override local governments, county planning departments, and not approve data centers to be built? I believe that the West Virginia Public Utility Commission has this power to override local decisions on power generation development. Does that extend to data centers?
Yeah, so the way preemption works is yeah, the PSC can do this sort of stuff, and they're responsible for especially if it's going to involve siting energy projects next to them, and really that's what the data center folks want. The thing about preemption generally is that the reality is the legislature can decide to preempt on any issue. It doesn't have to be data centers or energy or anything else. Texas was a first mover in that when they preempted county and municipal governments from interfering with siting gas wells. And it's continued to pick up steam since then. So yeah, they have a lot of power to preempt, both for good if they chose to, or for bad. So
yes,
yep.
Thank you so much. And folks may have heard about House Bill 2014 that passed last year that was the data center and microgrid bill. And that restricted the local jurisdiction specifically in regards to data centers. So I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in any more on that piece specifically.
No, just that it's one in a long. If you're in my world studying this stuff, states preempt lots of stuff. So especially when it comes to issues of economic development and infrastructure, they're just not going to allow local governments to impede that stuff, and they've made that clear. So.
Thank you. And then the second question that we have is, do data centers make up for the low severance tax?
Well, so there's a lot of debate about that. And the debate starts at how do you tax? Severance tax is pretty easy to collect. Historically, it was a ton of coal or board foot of lumber. We got rid of timber severance, right? But the debate right now is do you tax them based on the input fuel? So if they're running off natural gas, is it going to be some sort of notion of a fee charged for every cubic foot of gas? Are you going to charge them some rate that has to do with output on these things? Though I can tell you from those circles, it's very hard for them to think about what that is. And then the other question is these places are going to demand exemptions on equipment purchases, and these places, folks, they're not like a coal plant. They have to replace their stuff every 4 or 5 years. So that's a lot of revenue loss, and they will get those. I mean, every other state has them. So, so I guess what I would say is it's very hard for me to answer that question without knowing what they're going to tax and how it's going to be offset by the incentives it's going to take to draw them here. Because it takes a good set of incentives to get them here. We don't have flat land. And I mean, it's hard. I mean, you folks know, you live on the rivers. It's hard to get anything anywhere up out of these gorges. So yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, and I know there was a lot of debate around the tax structure of, again, House Bill 2014, which was the big piece of legislation that we saw pass last year. So I know that a lot of that tax revenue was sent directly to the states and not to the local jurisdictions where they were located. So didn't know if you wanted to add anything else onto that as well.
No, the sort of fight right now really has to do, at least in the circles I've been in, really has to do right now with how we're going to incentivize these things to get here. That's kind of where the legislature is right now, and where the governor's office is. So somebody says mountaintop coal mines can be flat. They absolutely can be flat. The issue is sort of getting water to them. Right. So, and I don't know myself that I believe Google's research on this. These things take a lot of water. A lot of that water can't be returned to the place you got it from, because it either evaporates as steam or it is boiling hot when it exits the, definitely not going to be good for rivers with trout. Yeah, let's put it that way. So
That's absolutely true. Thank you so much, Dr. Workman. And I know you'll be sticking around questions. They can stay on the call and hold on to those questions, or continue to put them in the chat. And we can make sure to circle back with you again at the end. But thank you so much for all of your work and for just giving us a rundown of what some of the hot button topics we can expect this year during the session. Thank you so much.
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate all of y'all. It's a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And next, we're going to turn it over to another expert in the field. We're going to be hearing from Lucia Valentine, who is the lead lobbyist at the West Virginia Environmental Council. So we work closely in partnership with, you might hear us call it E-Council, but the West Virginia Environmental Council. We work as one of those partner groups. And so Lucia is going to be walking us through some of the legislative priorities and what's kind of happening and moving at the legislature on the ground to build on what Dr. Workman just shared. So Lucia, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Workman, for that detailed overview, especially around data centers, which, like you mentioned, certainly is the hot button issue at the Capitol these days. I know we're all concerned about many aspects of the build out of those across the state. So, as Maria mentioned, I am the lobbyist for the West Virginia Environmental Council. This is my 5th year lobbying for E-Council. So it's always kind of exciting to be back at session, but also terrifying because there's a million things happening, and I feel like we're fielding, putting out fire after fire. So, kind of here to just kind of give an overview of what we do and a couple of the bills that we're watching. I put a couple things in the chat. Sorry to be kind of link heavy this evening, but I linked our priorities so that you can go over those in more detail if you would like. I also linked our new policy briefing book, which a couple folks on this call, Maria included, helped to put together. So shout out to those folks who really put together a robust book for us this session, which really delves into the different issue areas that we focus on and gives a lot of great information. So we're really happy to have this as a resource for not only advocates, but also for legislators this session to give them more information on what we care about. And then lastly, I also linked our weekly legislative updates. The E-Council lobby team puts this out every Friday, normally around midday, to give an update of what we've been working on the session. So that's a link to our first week, and you can sign up on E-Council's website to receive those newsletters. We have another one coming out tomorrow morning, which will go a little more in depth than what I'm going to cover this evening, but that's a great way to stay informed on a weekly basis during session. So E-Council is a member group organization, and we represent environmental groups from across the state, including West Virginia Rivers. So that's why we work closely in coalition together during the legislative session. E-Council represents these groups at the Capitol, and we lobby on behalf of the legislative priorities that we all mutually agreed upon. As things that we want to work on for the session. So E-Council also hosts E-Day. I know that was mentioned at the beginning of the call. So if anyone is coming down for E-Day, I'm happy to be one point of contact for that if you want to set up meetings with your lawmakers or want help discerning which lawmakers would be effective to meet with, or you need help getting around the Capitol, or you want to kind of go over your pitch to lawmakers, or whatever it is, feel free to reach out to myself. My lobby partner, Casey Russell, as well, will be on the ground. There'll be lots of folks there that day to help you get connected and pointed in the right place if you decide that a one-on-one meeting is a way that you'd like to engage. So we're really excited to see you all in just a couple weeks. It's always nice for the lobby team to have friendly faces on the ground because we're, so used to talking to folks and trying to convince them to care about our issues. So it's nice when the Enviros take over for a day. So with all that being said, just to kind of quickly go over some of the things that we're watching this year, our priorities always include looking out for clean air and clean water. So a couple bills I want to flag is the return of the Above Ground Storage Tank Act, which was just reintroduced in the Senate as Senate Bill 641. This bill aims to deregulate tanks in zones of critical concern or tanks that are located closest to our drinking water intakes. So we always have drinking water concerns around this bill. It's introduced just about every year. We've been successful in stopping further rollbacks for a couple years now. Thank you, Mike, for sharing the text. And if some of you remember, this bill was initially enacted as a response to the 2014 water crisis. So since then, they have continued to roll back regulations or protections rather around these tanks. And the last protections that are left are again around tanks in zones of critical concern or tanks that are closest to our drinking water intake. So in order to safeguard drinking water and prevent another chemical spill from happening, and making sure that we can detect leaks in a timely manner, it's really important that we continue to defeat this bill. So it's been referred to the Senate Energy Committee, which is currently where we're focusing our efforts on education, action alerts, and things like that. So keep your eyes peeled for things to come out around the Above Ground Storage Tank Act soon. And then as it relates to clean air, we have the Community Air Monitoring Bill, Senate Bill 88, which is back again this year. This seeks to delegitimize community air monitoring programs or community air monitors that have been set up across the state. These help to kind of fill in the regulatory gaps between DEP's monitors and EPA's monitors and help folks identify air quality in their communities in real time. So we've been defeating this bill for 2 years now. Hopefully this will be a third year. We're working in the Senate Government and Organization Committee right now to ask that they not run the bill this year. And then another priority this year is around flooding. So many of you may have seen the governor's announcement to fund a $10 million flood sensor program called Sentry this session, which involves directing $10 million to our flood resiliency fund. We support sensors. We definitely think that there are benefits there, life-saving benefits, but want to make sure that our flood resiliency fund actually gets fully funded for resiliency efforts. Sensors are great, but we also need things that help mitigate the impacts of flooding because we're going to continue to see these disasters, and West Virginia is one of the most at-risk states for these flood disasters. So this fund has gone without any money for several years now, and we're working with some legislators to hopefully introduce legislation to direct more money again towards those resiliency efforts. And then I know Dr. Workman covered a lot around data centers, but just monitoring bills related to data centers, particularly around water use. We have some senators who are interested in introducing legislation to address the water piece, but also the piece about local control and potentially adjusting taxes and how that gets dispersed to the local communities. So we, of course, constantly hear pushback from the governor's office on making any changes to House Bill 2014 in any substantive ways. So we're going to continue to kind of monitor that and push the envelope there because we do, of course, have a lot of water concerns around the build out of these centers. And then I think the last thing to flag this evening is the sound science or anti-science bill, which is back this year, which seeks to censor what science can be used when enacting protections for public health and environmental protections. This year's bill, unfortunately, largely targets PFAS standards and regulations, so we're monitoring that. Dr. Hitt with the Rivers Coalition was helpful in helping to defeat that bill last year, so I know he's doing some analysis right now on what the text means for this year, and we'll likely be doing another campaign against that bill if it runs in committee. So look out for that as well. But I think that's most of what I had today. We're also, of course, following a couple of public lands bills. But I'll put my email in the chat and feel free to reach out to me anytime if there's bills that come up that you have questions about, or you want to come in and attend a meeting or speak to anything, let me know. We're always happy to have folks come and join us at the Capitol.
Thank you so much, Lucia, for all your work that you do and for walking us through all that. I know these topics, whether it's, above ground storage tanks that hold a tremendous amount of chemicals or data centers or flooding, these are really important topics in our community. And so we really appreciate you being on the ground every day and helping us stay informed so that we can advocate from the ground as well. So thank you. And I know Lucia is sticking around. So if anybody has questions for her. She also put her email into the chat. So feel free to type your questions there in the chat for Lucia or any questions that you're still holding on to from Dr. Workman from his presentation. Feel free to drop those there and we will circle back during the Q&A at the end of our session. So for our next segment, we are going to turn it over to really getting you all ready to come and join us for advocacy efforts. So you've heard a lot about Environmental Day, which we're prepping for on February 23rd. This is really an opportunity to come together with like-minded folks and to advocate on some of these issues. And maybe some of you will land at the Capitol before then, and that's awesome. We'd love to see you. But maybe this is really an opportunity. We like to use it as an on-ramp for folks. So whether you are just coming to table for your organization or to meet people in the field or to talk directly to your legislators, whatever it may be for you, we invite you to come and join us and get into the mix. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to set up a meeting, and then Carrie's going to help us practice the flow of what those meetings can feel like towards the end of our call. So a couple rules of thumb when you're trying to set up a meeting with legislators. You want to try to set up the meeting as soon as possible. The schedules and the bills that are moving at this time are really starting to stack up. And the committee meetings tend to build and get a little bit longer as we get into the later half of session. So you really want to try to set up any meeting that is important to you as soon as possible. And you definitely want to be persistent as well. It may take a little time, or they may say that they don't have availability on Wednesday at first, but keep pushing. Let them know that you're in town on a certain day and that you really want to meet with your elected representative and really push to find some time that can work for both of you. The senators do have staffs that can make calendar management a little bit easier. Delegates usually, though, do not. And so sometimes it can take in a couple extra nudges to get to those delegates since they don't always have administrative staff helping to manage their calendars. And West Virginia Rivers also has a link that's super helpful that we will drop in the chat in a moment. And it helps you to look up your elected officials. So that is going to be your elected officials on the state level, both your delegates and your delegate and senators, as well as folks on the federal level. And it provides phone numbers and addresses, sometimes even social media handles and different things for you to be able to reach folks. So we encourage you to use that link if you're not familiar with your elected officials already. So you've made it to E-Day, you've decided to come. How will the actual meeting flow? And how can you make sure to have a successful meeting? So the thing I like to tell people is that it's really about having a conversation. It's really important to remember that your elected officials are also just people. They're just like you, right? They live in the same area as you. Maybe if you're talking to your own elected official, they at least live in the same state as you. And so there's going to be something that you can find that's in common between you all, whether it is around those topics that we just talked about, some of those hot button topics, but sometimes it's something else. I mean, sometimes it's kayaking on your favorite river, or it's the fact that Blackwater Falls is both of your favorite state park, or that, they have grandkids and so they want to see clean water for their community, and you also want to see clean water as an outcome for your community. So figure out what it is that you share in common and tie that into your story, right? Know your reason of why you're there. Why are you coming to talk to them and why is this important? And make sure to lead with that because you're the expert of your own experience and it's really an opportunity for you to bring that expertise into the room as part of the conversation. And then of course, because people are human, we want to treat them courteously, right? You may not agree on a lot of the topics that they just voted on the day before or 2 days ago, but we want to stay focused and be on time to the meeting, be polite, and stay really focused on what it is, on that why you're there to talk to them, right? You also want to remember you don't always have much time, so you want to be wise with your message. You want to try to deliver it quickly and succinctly in a way that they can really understand. And again, we've gone over this, but make sure to tell your story. Make sure you're focusing on what it is, why you're there. And usually we like to tell people to have around 1 to 3 concerns. That may be bill numbers that you're specifically tracking and you're asking them to vote yes or to vote no or to take a certain action on that bill number, or it may be more topic based regarding some of the topics that we've talked about. And you always want to make an ask. So whether it is voting yes or voting no, or maybe it's additional funding for flood resiliency measures, right? Whatever that specific ask is, you want to give them something to do coming out of your meeting. And you always want to give them a takeaway, right? So leave them with something to remember you by. Maybe that's a 1-pager or a fact sheet on the topic of why you're there. You always want to leave them. Hopefully it has contact information on it. And if you're coming to E-Day, we will be providing you with a lot of these things. So don't get too worried. We'll give you all of the building blocks that you need. And then of course you always want to thank them for the meeting and for taking the time to talk with you. So, what's the best thing that can happen at a meeting? And that is the question you cannot answer. And I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's always a reason for follow-up, right? So we want to welcome questions, even if you don't know the answer or if you don't have the data, that's okay, because it's an automatic opportunity to touch base with them again and to circle back, maybe providing them with that data or pointing them in the direction of that follow-up question. And like I mentioned before, the good news is we'll be providing you with updates on legislation. So February 23rd is a few weeks away. So a lot is going to change between now and then. But just like Lucia mentioned earlier, and Dr. Workman as well, that a lot of things are moving. And so we'll be giving you the most updated legislation, bill numbers, talking points that you need in order to have a successful meeting. And you may come with your own too, and that's great as well. But we want to make sure that when you land at the Capitol, you have what you need. So we'll make sure to provide you with a lot of those basics information on the concerns that you may have and what that ask can and should be coming out of that meeting. And Carrie, I think with that, I am turning it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria. You've done an excellent job. And like Maria said, if you can't come on E-Day and you have other concerns that haven't been hit in the e-council booklet or in our priorities, we typically will have 1-pagers about a lot of the things. So please hit us up and we might have some takeaways for you to have a jump off point or to use in your meetings, even if it's not on E-Day. All right, so one last point that we wanted to make is to follow up. So after your meeting, we recommend sending a thank you. A handwritten, mailed note is best, but also an email is fine, especially if you're trying to add documents or links or things like that to follow up with questions. And then follow up with any new questions or issues raised in the meeting. And this is a great way to kind of build that connection with your officials and open that door for future communication. So we've talked about this a little bit. Dr. Workman's talked about it. Maria's talked about it. There are things that you can do from home if you can't make it to the Capitol. If you visit the legislature's website, you can watch or listen to floor sessions of the House or Senate. They're linked on that site. You can watch or listen to House or Senate committee meetings. Some are recorded, not all. You can also now, this is new for this session, you can leave comments on bills directly on the legislature's website. So if you go to the home page and you click on bill status, two tabs will come up and you pick bill status again on the menu, and then you can enter the bill number, or you can search for some of the wording if you know of the bill. And then it will come up with the whole history of the bill, and you can click on the button to add a public comment. So put your information in, comment, and hit submit. Like Maria mentioned, Delegate Kayla Young has put out a video. The actual Facebook page for the legislature has put out a video on how to do this. Also, comments are filtered. So please make sure that your comments are appropriate so that it doesn't get filtered out, and that we're using those kind words like we talked about earlier when we're meeting with officials. We also want to use those when we're doing public comments. All right, so now we're going to get to the point. We're almost finished with our evening, and so we're going to take just a few minutes and we're going to practice your ask. So we're going to put you into a breakout room, and please introduce yourselves and then take turns delivering what your ask is, either when you go to the Capitol for a specific legislative day, a theme day, or if you're coming for E-Day. Take turns delivering your ask, discuss what works and what doesn't, and then we'll bring everyone back automatically, and we'll take volunteers back in the main group and we'll report out. All right, everybody's coming back together. I know my screen said everyone will return in 58 seconds or something, so we'll give them a few more minutes to return, and then we'll see if we have any volunteers that want to share.
It looks like everybody is back in now.
Super. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for handling that and getting us all into breakout rooms. We had a super discussion in our breakout room. So if anybody wants to use the reaction button, you can raise your hand if you're interested in volunteering to either tell us what you discussed in your breakout room or give us your ask. We would love to hear it. No volunteers. We have Warren and Mike. Mike, put your hand down. Warren, we would love, it's so nice to have you on the call. Thank you for being a wonderful partner. Where did Warren go? Did Warren put his
I
hand down?
apologize to everybody that I don't have my camera up today. A little bit of last minute tech shuffle. So I hope everybody can hear me all right. But yeah, so just a briefest of introductions. My name is Warren Hillsboss. I hail from Marion County, West Virginia. But in a professional capacity, I work as a community liaison, focusing more in the northern panhandle, the Ohio River Valley. And I'm really into what I do because I love people and I love this state. So, I really just like trying to be that one of those kind of connecting pieces between folks who can't get to Charleston and the folks who know Charleston so well. And so I have two issues. One that's a little more personal to me that I'll be checking in with some of my legislators that represent me as a voter about, because we deal with the Fairmont brine processing plant cleanup here in Marion County. That's one thing that's kind of specific to our agenda. And so a little bit about, are we really keeping an eye on fracking waste processing and where that waste is going and that sort of stuff, because it can actually be hazardous. There's lots of other things going on, but that's one of the things that honestly motivates me. So it's one of the things I try to bring up, that there's lots of things to try to keep track of, and we're just trying to help. That can be helpful sometimes to be less hostile, even with Republicans. If you are a constituent, that will help. But in a more professional capacity, talking about the Northern Panhandle, I'm going to be trying to reach some of those legislators, partly just to get to know them a little bit, feel them out, on some of the issues, but particularly PFAS is a concern to a lot of folks. Everyone really thinks a lot about their water, and the Ohio's overdue for help. So hopefully they will uphold stronger regulations for PFAS in particular. The container bill also definitely very relevant to that discussion as well. So depends what time allows.
Super, Warren. Thank you so much for sharing. Those were great
Yeah.
asks. Does anyone besides a West Virginia Rivers employee want to share their ask?
Sure, I will. If
But-
not, nobody else wants to.
Super, David.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, my ask was centered around zoning actually in my county in Berkeley County, West Virginia. Mainly because neighboring counties have zoning in Jefferson County. They enacted zoning in the 70s, and you can kind of see the difference when you drive through Jefferson County versus driving through Berkeley County. And I think it comes into play with clean water and the Opequon Creek in particular. You know, basically holding developers more accountable with better ordinances for runoff and other things like that, and making them do better due diligence when it comes to best management practices with water runoff and stormwater. So yeah, I'd love to see some zoning ordinance enacted and improve and make the ordinances they do have maybe a little better. So yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for that background and the explanation. And that's a great ask. All right, we have about 2 more slides to finish up, and then we'll do questions. So I'm going to share my screen again. And the first slide that we are going to look at is how to register for eDay. So I think one of the Rivers staff members will put the link in the chat, but registering for eDay will get you all the information as it comes available, so that you can be clued into the agenda for the day and which partners will be there, and then counted for things like lunch or things like that. I know when I registered, it talked about possibly having something the evening before, if enough participants are interested. So please take a look at that link. You can also find it on our Facebook page, on our socials, on eCouncil's socials, so you can get signed up there. And then our last slide is just really to talk about reflections, questions, and feedback. So I think a lot of the questions we've discussed as they've come up, but if you're interested in asking questions to the whole group, you're welcome to either type them in the chat or to use your reaction and raise your hand, and we can get those answered for you also. We've also, I think everyone's put their emails in the chat. So you have Lucia's email. Our lobbyists for West Virginia Rivers this year are Executive Director Jenny Smith, and then we have a contractor, Scott Mandarola, previously with the West Virginia DEP. And so they are our registered lobbyists for this session. Maria, who is on the call, is our fantastic policy manager. So she is really our expert and keeps us all sane during this legislative session. So please feel free to reach out to any of us with questions or for assistance. I'm in Charleston, so I'm at the Capitol a lot, and then Maria will be coming down a lot. Jenny's here. So we're really here to support you on eDay, but also any of the other days. There'll be a flood resiliency day. We have Black Policy Day, Rural Health Day. So we do have a number of themed days, legislative days that we'll be involved with as well. And Dr. Workman put his email in the chat also.
I also wanted to shout out Mike Jones, our conservation manager, who does an amazing job with tracking bills too. And I know he's responding to folks in the chat, but it's really a team effort. And I think that's the important thing to remember is none of us can do it alone, but together we really can. So thank you everybody for being part of this team. And yeah, we're excited to see you on the Capitol grounds.
And this has been recorded. It's probably yelled at you a couple times about that. So we will send out information tomorrow or Monday from the recording and links and things like that, just as reminders. Yeah, no questions. We got everybody's content. Well, thank you all for joining us and supporting great causes in the state. And thank you for backing West Virginia Rivers and eCouncil. We appreciate you. Thank you to Dr. Workman and Lucia Valentine for being on, and then our team at Rivers that has been working on this. Awesome job to Maria and Mike and Maggie. So thank you all for joining. If you don't follow us on socials, please do. Good night.